Just a quiet barista. That's all anyone saw when she took their order each morning. Small, soft-spoken, the kind of woman people barely noticed. But when the army general saw what was hidden beneath her sleeve, a faded silver star tattoo that only the bravest earn, everything changed. Because sometimes the most dangerous warriors are the ones hiding in plain sight. Type respect in the comments if you believe heroes walk among us every single day. Chen was 28 years old and professionally invisible. At Sunrise Coffee on 5th Street, she was just another face behind the counter. Small frame, quiet voice, the kind of person customers looked through rather than at. She wore her dark hair pulled back, kept her sleeves rolled down even in summer heat, and never talked about herself. "Large coffee, black," the businessman would bark without looking up from his phone. "Coming right up," Maya would reply with the same gentle smile she'd perfected over 3 years. The regulars knew nothing about her except that she was reliable, polite, and forgettable. Perfect background music to their busy lives. Maya preferred it that way. Anonymity was safer than recognition. Questions were more dangerous than curiosity. But Chen hadn't always been invisible. 3 years ago, she'd been someone entirely different. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., Maya opened the coffee shop alone. She appreciated the solitude, the routine that helped quiet memories that never quite stayed buried. Steam from the espresso machine, the ritual of grinding beans, the familiar weight of ceramic cups. These simple tasks kept her grounded in a world that felt safe and predictable. Her coworkers knew almost nothing about her past. Sarah, the college student who worked afternoons, had tried making conversation during their shifts. "So where did you work before this?" Sarah had asked during a slow Tuesday. "Different places," Maya had replied, wiping down the counter with unnecessary thoroughness. "Like, what kind of places?" "Nothing interesting." Sarah had learned to stop asking. Maya was friendly enough, but there was something in her eyes that suggested some stories were too heavy to share with people who wouldn't understand the weight. Maya's daily routine was precise, almost military in its consistency. First customer at 6 a.m., lunch rush from 11 to 2, evening cleanup finished by 8 p.m. She moved through each task with efficiency that spoke of deeper training, but no one paid attention to how she positioned herself to see all exits, how she assessed each new customer before they spoke, how her hands never shook even during the busiest rushes. The coffee shop attracted all types: college students cramming for exams, business people rushing between meetings, retired folks lingering over newspapers. Maya served them all with the same calm professionalism, remembering orders without writing them down, handling difficult customers with patience that seemed almost superhuman. "Medium cappuccino? Extra foam?" called Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who came in every Thursday. "Absolutely, Mrs. Patterson. How's your grandson doing?" "Still deployed overseas. I worry about him." Maya's hands paused for just a moment as she steamed the milk. "He'll be fine. They train them well." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "You're sweet to say that, dear." If only she knew that Maya had once been responsible for bringing soldiers home when training wasn't enough. The closest Maya came to revealing herself was with Marcus, the veteran who worked construction and stopped by every Wednesday. He always ordered a black coffee and left a $5 tip, speaking quietly with the respect of someone who understood what service meant. "You remind me of someone," he'd said one morning, studying her face. "Oh?" "Combat medic in my unit. Same way of moving, like you're always ready for something to go wrong." Maya had simply smiled and handed him his coffee. "Hope your day goes smooth, Marcus." But Marcus noticed things others missed. The way Maya's eyes tracked movement in her peripheral vision, how she kept the first aid kit stocked beyond normal requirements, the precise way she handled emergencies, like when a customer collapsed from heat exhaustion and Maya had responded with medical knowledge that seemed far beyond coffee shop training. Tuesday, March 15th, started like any other day. Maya arrived early, prepared the morning setup, and unlocked the doors at exactly 6 a.m. The breakfast rush began with familiar faces ordering familiar drinks. But at 7:23 a.m., someone different walked through the door. General Robert Morrison was 58 years old, 3 stars on his shoulder, and unaccustomed to waiting in line for coffee. He was in town for a military advisory meeting, staying at the hotel across the street, and had decided to grab coffee before his morning briefing. His aide had recommended this place. Maya noticed him immediately. Military bearing was impossible to fake or hide. The way he carried himself, scanned the room, positioned himself with clear sight lines. But she continued making drinks for the customers ahead of him, hoping he wouldn't look too closely at the woman behind the counter. "Large coffee, black, 2 sugars," General Morrison ordered when he reached the front. "Yes, sir," Maya replied automatically, then caught herself. Civilians didn't say "sir" to customers, no matter how obvious their military background. The general's eyes sharpened slightly, but he said nothing. As Maya reached up to grab a cup from the high shelf, her sleeve caught on the espresso machine's steam wand. The fabric pulled back just enough to expose her left wrist. General Morrison saw the tattoo and froze. A silver star. Faded, but unmistakable. The medal given for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States. The cup slipped from Maya's fingers, shattering on the floor behind the counter. She quickly pulled her sleeve down, but it was too late. Their eyes met across the counter, and in that moment, both of them knew the careful facade had just crumbled. "Miss," General Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of command, "I need to speak with you privately." The coffee shop suddenly felt very small. Maya finished General Morrison's coffee with hands that didn't quite shake, but moved with the careful precision of someone fighting to maintain control. Other customers waited in line behind him, unaware that something significant was happening just 3 feet away. "Sarah," Maya called to her co-worker, "can you handle the register for a moment?" "Sure thing," Sarah replied, not looking up from the pastry display she was restocking. Maya gestured toward the small seating area near the window. General Morrison followed, his coffee forgotten on the counter. They sat at a corner table, away from other customers but still visible to anyone watching. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chen," the general said quietly. "Medical Corps, 82nd Airborne Division." It wasn't a question. Maya's carefully maintained anonymity dissolved like sugar in hot coffee. "Sir. Operation Desert Shield, 2019. You were the medic who held an aid station under fire for 6 hours while your unit was pinned down by enemy snipers." Maya said nothing, but her hands betrayed her, tracing the rim of an empty coffee cup with the same nervous gesture she'd developed during debriefings that had determined her future. General Morrison leaned forward. 12 soldiers lived because of what you did that day. The Silver Star was the least this country owed you. Sir, I'd prefer not to. You disappeared after the award ceremony. No forwarding address, no contact with your unit, no Veterans Affairs follow-up. Just gone." Maya met his eyes for the first time since sitting down. Sometimes service requires different kinds of sacrifice. Like hiding in a coffee shop pretending to be someone you're not. Like making sure nobody asks questions that don't have good answers. The general studied her face, seeing now what he'd missed before. The hypervigilance, the controlled movements, the way she'd automatically addressed him as "Sir." All the signs of someone carrying more than coffee orders and customer complaints. General Morrison had read Maya's file that morning, making calls to verify what he'd suspected the moment he saw her tattoo. The full story was classified, but the basics were enough to explain why she'd chosen invisibility over recognition. The investigation, he said carefully, was political theater. Everyone knew that. Maya's laugh held no humor. Knowing it and proving it are different things, sir. When Congress needs someone to blame for an operation that never happened, the medic who saved too many lives becomes an embarrassment. You were cleared of all charges. Officially. But cleared doesn't mean forgotten. Cleared doesn't stop people from wondering what really happened in that compound. The truth was more complicated than any official report could capture. Maya had been part of a medical team attached to a special operations unit conducting a rescue mission in a region that, officially, contained no American personnel. When everything went wrong, bad intelligence, compromised extraction, wounded soldiers trapped in a hostile zone, Maya had made decisions that saved lives but raised uncomfortable questions about what American forces were doing there in the first place. Her Silver Star citation read, like something from a movie, "For gallantry in action while serving as a combat medic during a classified operation, Staff Sergeant Chen maintained her aid station under direct enemy fire, treating wounded personnel while directing evacuation procedures. Her actions directly resulted in the survival of 12 critically wounded soldiers. What the citation didn't mention was the political firestorm that followed when the classified operation became front-page news. Someone needed to take responsibility for why American troops were engaged in combat in a country where they supposedly didn't exist. Maya had volunteered to be that someone. "They offered you witness protection," General Morrison said. "Full relocation, new identity, government pension." "I declined." "Why?" Maya looked around the coffee shop, Sarah making drinks for the growing morning crowd, Mrs. Patterson reading her newspaper, Marcus finishing his coffee before heading to the construction site. Normal people living normal lives, unaware they were sharing space with someone who'd once held dying soldiers while rockets exploded around her position. "Because this is real," she said simply. "This life, these people, making coffee and paying rent and worrying about ordinary problems. After 3 years of congressional hearings and classified briefings and lawyers who spoke in language designed to hide truth, ordinary felt like the most honest thing I could choose." General Morrison finished his coffee while Maya explained her 3 years of careful anonymity. No social media, no veterans organizations, no contact with former military colleagues. She'd built a life that fit entirely within the 4 walls of a coffee shop and a small apartment above a used bookstore. "You know," the general said, "there are people who've been looking for you." Maya tensed. "What kind of people?" "The good kind. The 12 soldiers you saved. 3 of them are officers now. One's running a non-profit for wounded veterans. Another's a military contractor working on advanced battlefield medical systems. They wanted to thank you properly." "Sir, I appreciate that, but Staff Sergeant Rivera, you remember him? Took shrapnel in his leg, would have bled out if you hadn't maintained pressure on his femoral artery for 2 hours while coordinating evacuations." Maya remembered. She remembered all of them. "He named his daughter Maya. His wife wanted to send you a photo." The words hit harder than any enemy fire Maya had endured. She'd spent 3 years convincing herself that disappearing was the right choice, that her service was complete, that the chapter of her life defined by military medicine was closed. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because hiding isn't serving. Because the skills that made you the best combat medic in your division don't disappear just because you change your address. Because this country needs people like you visible, not invisible." General Morrison pulled out a business card and placed it on the table between them. "There's a position opening at Walter Reed. Advanced trauma training for the next generation of combat medics. Someone with your experience, your record, could save hundreds of lives by teaching others what you learned." Maya stared at the card without touching it. "Sir, my record is complicated. So is everyone's who actually did something that mattered. The question isn't whether you have a perfect record. The question is whether you're going to let politicians define your value or whether you're going to let your service speak for itself." For 3 years, Maya had measured her life in coffee orders and quiet shifts. She'd created a world small enough to control, predictable enough to feel safe. But as she sat across from General Morrison, she realized that safety wasn't the same as living. "If I said yes," she said carefully, "would my name become public again?" "Only to the extent you choose. But Maya, you earned the right to use your own name. You earned the right to be proud of what you accomplished." Maya thought about Marcus, the construction worker who'd seen through her careful facade. About Mrs. Patterson, whose grandson was deployed somewhere dangerous, surrounded by medics who might need the training Maya could provide. About the 12 soldiers who'd gone home to their families because she'd been willing to hold an aid station under fire. What would I be teaching? Advanced trauma care under extreme conditions, triage protocols for mass casualty situations, leadership under pressure, the kind of real-world medical skills that can't be learned from textbooks. And the investigation? Closed, sealed. The people who matter know what really happened, and the people who don't matter can't access the files. Maya picked up General Morrison's business card, studying the embossed seal of Walter Reed Medical Center. 3 years ago, she'd thought her military service was over. But maybe service wasn't about wearing a uniform. Maybe it was about using your skills to protect others, regardless of the setting. When would I start? General Morrison smiled, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him since he'd recognized her tattoo. Whenever you're ready to stop hiding and start helping again. 2 weeks later, Maya submitted her resignation at Sunrise Coffee. She didn't explain where she was going, just thanked everyone for 3 years of kindness and promised to visit when she could. Sarah, her afternoon co-worker, was particularly curious. So what's next for you? New job, Maya said simply. Medical field. I didn't know you had medical training. Maya smiled, rolling down her sleeves one last time. There's a lot of things about people we never know just by looking at them. On her final day, several regulars stopped by to say goodbye. Marcus, the construction worker, shook her hand with the firm grip of someone who understood respect. Good luck wherever you're going, he said. And Maya? I hope you get to be yourself again. Mrs. Patterson hugged her gently. You know, dear, in all the time you worked here, you never talked about yourself, but you always listened when others needed to talk. That's a gift. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. And Maya, I don't know what you did before this, but I could always tell you were someone special. Maybe, Maya thought, being special wasn't about hiding. Maybe it was about choosing when to reveal yourself. General Morrison arrived at 6 p.m. after the coffee shop had closed to drive Maya to her new life. She'd packed everything she owned into 2 suitcases, 3 years of careful anonymity reduced to clothing and a few books. Any regrets? He asked as they loaded her belongings into his car. Maya looked back at the coffee shop where she'd spent 3 years learning how to be invisible. No, sir, but I'm glad it's time to try being visible again. As they drove toward Walter Reed Medical Center, Maya rolled up her sleeves for the first time in 3 years. The silver star tattoo on her wrist caught the late afternoon sunlight, no longer a secret to be hidden, but a reminder of service that wasn't finished. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood before a classroom of 20 combat medics preparing for deployment. Her sleeves were rolled up, her silver star tattoo visible to anyone who looked closely, and her voice carried the authority of someone who'd learned these lessons under enemy fire. Today we're talking about trauma care under extreme conditions, she said, her voice steady and clear. Not the kind you practice in simulation, but the real thing. When you're under fire, when your equipment is damaged, when you have more casualties than you can handle and no backup coming. A young medic in the front row raised his hand. Ma'am, how do you stay calm when everything's going wrong? Maya smiled, thinking of a coffee shop where she'd learned that sometimes the most important service happens in the quietest moments. You remember that your training is stronger than your fear. You focus on the person in front of you who needs help, and you trust that doing your job, whatever it looks like, is the most important thing you can do. After class, she found a handwritten note on her desk from one of the students. Thank you for teaching us that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear aprons and serve coffee while carrying silver stars on their skin. Maya tucked the note into her pocket, next to a photo that Staff Sergeant Rivera had finally been able to send. His daughter Maya, smiling in a pink dress, holding a toy stethoscope. Some stories end with recognition, others begin there. Maya Chen had spent 3 years learning to be invisible. Now she was learning something harder, how to be seen, how to be proud, and how to let her service speak for itself. The quiet barista was gone. In her place stood a teacher, a mentor, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous warriors are indeed the ones who've learned when to hide and when to step into the light. Because the silver star on her wrist had never been about the medal or the recognition. It had always been about the promise to keep serving, regardless of uniform. And that promise, Maya had finally learned, was too important to keep hidden. Comment below if you believe heroes deserve to be proud of their service, and share this story if you think someone you know needs to hear that it's okay to step out of the shadows. Subscribe to Silent Warriors for more stories of hidden heroes who find their way back to the light.